3 a.m. They're awake again, staring at a ceiling that offers no answers, blinking in the dark like the silence might eventually tell them what went wrong. The phone screen lights up their face every few minutes. Not because anyone's texting them at this hour, no. They're checking, scrolling, hunting for breadcrumbs of your existence, like addicts searching for one more hit. And you're probably asleep right now, breathing slow, dreaming about things that have nothing to do with them. You moved on. You actually moved on. And that fact alone is eating them alive from the inside out. See, they thought they understood how this would go. They had the script written in their head. You were supposed to crumble. You were supposed to beg. You were supposed to send those late-night paragraphs filled with desperation and longing. You were supposed to be the one lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering where it all went wrong. But the roles got reversed, didn't they? And now they can't figure out how to flip the script back. They can't understand how you walked away so clean, so quiet, so absolutely unbothered. It's breaking something inside them that they didn't even know could break. 3 a.m. is when the masks fall off, when there's no audience to perform for, no friends to lie to, no social media to curate, just them in the darkness and the weight of your absence pressing down on their chest like a stone. They can't roll away. They remember things at 3 a.m., stupid things. The way you laughed at something that wasn't even that funny. The way you looked at them once, like you actually saw them. The way your voice sounded when you were tired. Details they didn't know they were storing. Details that are now playing on repeat, like a song they can't skip. 4 a.m. Still no sleep. They've scrolled through your profile twice now, maybe 3 times. They've lost count, looking for clues, looking for signs, looking for anything that might explain how you're thriving while they're drowning in a bed that suddenly feels too empty. Your last post gave them nothing. Just you living your life. Just you existing without them in the frame. And somehow that's worse than if you'd posted something angry, something bitter, something that proved they still occupied space in your head. But there's nothing. You gave them nothing. And nothing is the cruelest gift you could have offered. They screenshot things now, not to show anyone, just to look at later, just to study, like archaeologists examining artifacts from a civilization they destroyed and now desperately wish they could rebuild. They zoom in on backgrounds looking for evidence of someone new. They analyze captions for hidden meanings. They've become detectives investigating a case where they're both the criminal and the victim. 4 a.m. is when the bargaining starts. The mental gymnastics, the rewriting of history. Maybe if I hadn't said, but they know. Deep down in that place they don't like to visit. They know you're not coming back. Not because you can't, because you don't want to. And that distinction is a knife that keeps twisting. 5 a.m. The birds are starting to make noise outside their window. Normal people would hear that and think about a new day beginning. Fresh starts. Possibilities. But they hear it and feel panic because the birds mean morning is coming. Morning means they have to pretend to be functional. Morning means putting the mask back on and acting like they're not completely hollowed out by someone who isn't even trying to hurt them. That's the part that really gets them. You're not doing this on purpose. You're not playing games. You're not executing some strategic revenge plot. You're just living, just breathing, just existing in a world that no longer revolves around them. And somehow that indifference hits harder than hatred ever could. They've typed messages they'll never send, drafted paragraphs in their notes app, deleted and rewritten, and deleted again. What would they even say? What words exist that could undo what was done? What combination of letters could rebuild a bridge they burned while laughing? 5 a.m. is when exhaustion and obsession become the same thing. When the line between missing someone and being haunted by them disappears completely. They're not sure anymore if they want you back or if they just want this feeling to stop. But here's the thing. They're starting to realize, even if you came back, the feeling wouldn't stop. Because what they're really obsessing over isn't you. It's the version of themselves they were when you still believed in them. And that person is gone. You took them with you when you left. 6 a.m. They finally give up on sleep. Feet on cold floor. Bathroom light too bright. Mirror showing someone they barely recognize. When did those dark circles get so deep? When did their eyes start looking so empty? They splash water on their face like it might wash away the evidence of what your absence is doing to them. It doesn't work. They go through the motions. Shower, coffee, the mechanical rituals of mourning that used to feel automatic but now require actual effort. Every step feels heavier than it should. Every movement feels performative, like they're acting out the role of a person who has their life together, when really they're just a shell running on fumes and regret. 6 a.m. is when they start rehearsing, practicing what they'll say if someone asks how they're doing. Fine, good, busy, you know how it is. Little scripts for little lies that get them through the day without anyone noticing the collapse happening underneath. But the funny thing about obsession, it leaks. It seeps through the cracks, no matter how hard you try to contain it. Their friends have noticed. Their family has noticed. That coworker who barely knows them has noticed. Everyone can see something's wrong. They just can't see what, or rather who. 7 a.m. Getting ready for the day. Supposed to be focused on what's ahead, but their mind keeps drifting backward. They catch themselves standing still in the middle of getting dressed, just frozen, staring at nothing while their brain replays some random moment from months ago. Something you said, something you did, something they didn't appreciate until it became a memory instead of a reality. They've started seeing you everywhere, not literally, but in patterns, in reminders, in the way a stranger holds their coffee cup, in the way someone across the street laughs too loud, in songs they never paid attention to before that now feel like personal attacks. You've infected their perception, colored everything with traces of your existence. They can't experience the world normally anymore because you changed the lens they see through, and they don't know how to adjust it back. 7 a.m. is when the dread kicks in. The anticipation of a whole day spent pretending. A whole day of meetings and conversations and tasks that mean nothing because none of it involves you. Everything feels like filler now. Like the world is just killing time until what? They don't even know what they're waiting for anymore. 9 a.m. They're at work, supposed to be present, supposed to be productive. Their body showed up. Their mind is still at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering how they became the villain in a story they thought they were writing. Someone asks them a question. They respond with words that make sense, but carry no weight. A coworker makes a joke. They laugh at the right moment but feel nothing. Everything is happening at a distance now, like they're watching their own life through a foggy window. They check their phone under the desk. No notifications from you. Why would there be? You stopped reaching out? You stopped trying. And at first they felt relieved by that. Powerful even? Look how unbothered I am. Look how I don't need their energy. But now the silence from your end feels like a verdict, like you weighed their worth and found them lacking, like you did the math on their value and decided 0 was a generous estimate. 9 a.m. is when the paranoia creeps in. Are you talking about them to your friends? Are you laughing about what happened? Have you reduced their entire history to a cautionary tale you tell at parties? Or worse, are you not talking about them at all? Are they so irrelevant that they don't even warrant a mention? The not knowing is its own kind of torture. 12 p.m. Lunch break. An hour of freedom that feels like a prison sentence. Everyone's talking about normal things, weekend plans, TV shows, office drama, and they're sitting there nodding along while internally calculating how many hours until they can be alone again. Not because solitude brings peace, but because performing human connection has become exhausting in ways they can't explain. They eat without tasting, scroll without seeing, exist without living. Somewhere around the second bite of a sandwich they don't remember ordering, they wonder what you're eating right now, what you're doing, who you're with, if you're smiling, if you're happy, if you've noticed their absence even a fraction as much as they've noticed yours. The answer they know but won't accept. Probably not. 12 p.m. is when the anger flickers. Brief, hot. Directed nowhere useful. Anger at you for moving on. Anger at themselves for caring. Anger at the universe for allowing this to happen. For letting them become so dependent on someone who could walk away so easily. But the anger doesn't stick. It fades as fast as it arrives, leaving behind the same dull ache that's been living in their chest since you left. The anger would be easier. The anger would be cleaner. But obsession isn't clean. It's messy and pathetic and impossible to admit out loud. 3 p.m. The afternoon slump. Except for them, every hour is a slump now. They catch themselves typing your name into search bars without meaning to. Muscle memory. Their fingers know the letters better than the password to their own bank account. How many times have they searched you? How many times have they refreshed, hoping for something, anything, that might give them insight into the mind of someone who clearly doesn't think about them at all? Except, and here's the thing they don't know, you do think about them. Not with longing, not with regret, but with a kind of quiet curiosity. Wondering if they've learned anything. Wondering if the silence taught them what words never could. Wondering if they even have the capacity to understand what they lost. But that's the irony of obsession. It blinds you to the obvious. They're so busy trying to figure out how to get you back that they've never stopped to ask why they want you back. Is it love? Is it ego? Is it the unbearable reality that someone they underestimated turned out to be irreplaceable? 3 p.m. is when the mind wanders to dangerous places. To drafting text they'll delete. To imagining conversations that'll never happen. To constructing entire fantasy scenarios where they say the perfect thing and you suddenly understand and everything goes back to how it was before. But before was a lie. Before was them taking you for granted. Before was them assuming you'd always be there, always waiting, always willing to accept whatever scraps of attention they felt like throwing your way. Before is dead. And they're still attending the funeral. 6 p.m. Done with work. Back in their car, or their apartment, or whatever space they exist in when they're not performing functionality for an audience. This is when it gets dangerous. When distractions fade and reality sharpens. When there's nothing between them and the full weight of what they're feeling. They put on music and every song is about you. They try a podcast and their mind drifts within seconds. They scroll through streaming services looking for something, anything that might give them 2 hours of not thinking about you. Nothing works. 6 p.m. is when they start making bargains with the universe. If I just saw them one more time, if I could just explain, if they would just give me a chance to be different. They've become religious about someone who treated faith like a liability, praying to a God they never believed in. That you might think of them tonight, even for a second, even negatively. Just something. Some proof that they still exist in your world. But you don't negotiate with the past. And you've made that clear through the most brutal method possible: silence, distance, complete and total removal of their access to your energy. 9 p.m. They try to be normal. Dinner they barely eat. A show they barely watch. Maybe a drink that turns into 3 because alcohol at least dulls the sharp edges of their obsession. They've thought about reaching out, typed the words so many times, but something stops them. Maybe pride, maybe fear, maybe the dim awareness that any message they send would confirm what you already suspect, that they're not over it, that they can't move on, that you won. Because that's what this feels like, doesn't it? Like a competition they didn't know they were in until they'd already lost. And now they're looking at the scoreboard, trying to figure out how someone who seemed so quiet, so unbothered, so easy to overlook, somehow ended up with everything, while they're left with nothing but the echo of what they threw away. 9 p.m. is when the loneliness becomes a physical presence. Sitting next to them on the couch, lying next to them in bed, a constant companion that whispers your name in the silence between heartbeats. They've thought about finding someone else, about replacing you with another body, another face, another distraction. Some of them have tried, gone on dates that felt like job interviews, made connections that felt like cheap imitations, but nothing sticks. Nothing fills the space you left. Because the space wasn't shaped like a person. It was shaped like you specifically. And there's no substitute for specificity. 11 p.m. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling again. The cycle is almost complete. In a few hours, they'll be back at 3 a.m., awake and aching and unable to escape the prison they built around your memory. This is when the honesty comes. The brutal, quiet honesty that only exists in the space between consciousness and sleep. When they can admit things to themselves that they'd never say out loud. They miss you, not the idea of you, not the convenience of you. Not what you could give them or how you made them look. They miss you. The actual specific, irreplaceable you. The one who saw through them and stayed anyway. The one who gave chances they didn't deserve. The one who finally, after years of patience, decided enough was enough. 11 p.m. is when they realize this isn't about getting you back. It's about living with the consequence of losing you. And that consequence, they're starting to understand, might be permanent. Some doors don't reopen. Some bridges don't rebuild. Some people once gone are gone forever. And you might be one of those people. 3 a.m. They're awake again. The cycle continues. The obsession deepens. The hours blur together into one long meditation on absence. And somewhere across the city, across the distance, across the universe of experience that now separates you from them, you're sleeping peacefully, dreaming about futures that don't include them, building a life that doesn't require their presence. You're free, and they're trapped. Not by you, by themselves, by the choices they made, and the words they said, and the love they failed to recognize until it packed its bags and walked out the door without looking back. They've become their own prison, their own punishment, their own torture device. And you're just living, just existing, just being everything they were, too blind to appreciate when appreciation might have made a difference. 3 a.m. returns like a sentence, like a verdict, like the universe reminding them that some mistakes don't get corrected. They get lived with, they get carried, they get woven into the fabric of every sleepless night and every empty hour and every moment spent wondering what could have been if they'd just been someone worth staying for. This is what you've become to them. Not a memory, not a lesson, an obsession. A permanent resident in the part of their mind they can't control. You've taken up space in their consciousness that they can't clear, can't clean, can't reclaim for anything else. They didn't just lose you. They lost their peace. And the beautiful, terrible truth. You're not even trying to haunt them. You're not playing games. You're not executing revenge. You're just gone. And your absence is doing more damage than your presence ever could. The sun will rise again, and again, and again. Days will pass, weeks, maybe months, and they'll still be thinking about you, still checking, still searching, still lying awake at 3 a.m., wondering how someone they took for granted became the only person they can't forget. This is what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones. When you assume someone's patience means they don't have limits. When you mistake kindness for weakness and availability for desperation, you became unforgettable. Not through manipulation, not through games, through the simple act of leaving, when leaving was the only option left. And now you live rent-free in a mind that once took you for granted. Now you occupy space in a heart that once treated yours carelessly. Now you're the first thought at 3 a.m. and the last thought at midnight and every thought in between. They can't stop thinking about you. And the most powerful part? You're barely thinking about them at all.
You really believed kindness was the answer, didn't you? You walked through this world thinking that if you stayed gentle, if you stayed patient, if you kept giving, things would eventually turn around. You thought being good would protect you. You thought showing understanding would earn respect. You thought your kindness would soften people. Listen to me. That belief wasn't noble, it was naive. And the truth is, your kindness didn't change them at all. It revealed them. See, that's what no one tells you. Kindness doesn't transform everyone. It exposes who they already are. When you showed compassion, some people felt gratitude. Others felt opportunity. When you offered trust, some people handled it carefully. Others squeezed it until it broke. Your kindness wasn't wasted. It was diagnostic. It showed you exactly who you were dealing with. And what did they show you? They showed you selfishness. They showed you entitlement. They showed you how quickly they'd take without asking, how easily they'd cross lines without guilt, how comfortable they were draining you while pretending it was normal. You weren't unlucky. You were surrounded by people who mistook generosity for permission. You thought they didn't notice your effort. Oh, they noticed. They noticed every time you stayed silent. Every time you forgave too quickly, every time you gave more than you should have. They didn't miss it. They studied it. Because there are people in this world who don't see kindness as character. They see it as access. You weren't kind to them because you were weak. You were kind because you believed in decency. But they didn't share that belief. And that's where the damage happened. You assumed they played by the same rules. They didn't. They never did. You gave them patience. They gave you excuses. You gave them understanding. They gave you manipulation. You gave them loyalty. They gave you convenience. And every time you felt that knot in your chest, that quiet discomfort you tried to ignore, that was your instinct warning you. But you overrode it. You told yourself to be better, to be calmer, to be kinder. That was the mistake. Because kindness without boundaries isn't virtue. It's self-erasure. And the longer it went on, the clearer it became. They didn't respect you more. They respected you less. Not because you lacked value, but because you never made them earn access to it. Here's the part that hurts the most. They didn't accidentally take advantage of you. They chose to. They saw how much you were willing to give. And instead of meeting you halfway, they leaned back and let you carry everything. They watched you exhaust yourself and felt no urgency to stop it. That wasn't ignorance. That was character. Your kindness held up a mirror, and they didn't like what it showed, so they justified it. They normalized it. They convinced themselves you were fine, because that made it easier to keep taking. And you kept hoping they'd wake up. You kept believing that one day they'd realize what you were worth, that one day they'd feel remorse. Let me be clear with you. People who benefit from your silence do not regret it. They don't change when you suffer quietly. They change when access is removed. And when you finally stop giving, that's when the panic starts. That's when they accuse you of changing. That's when they say, you've become cold. That's when they act confused about boundaries you were never allowed to have before. Not because they miss you, because they miss what you provided. Your kindness showed their true nature. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start to realize something uncomfortable. You were never too much. They were never enough. You weren't asking for miracles. You were asking for basic respect. And they failed that test repeatedly. So stop blaming yourself for trusting. Trust wasn't the flaw. Blind loyalty was. You don't need to harden your heart into stone. You need to sharpen it with clarity. Kindness should be selective. It should be earned. It should be protected. Because when you give it to everyone, it becomes meaningless. And listen carefully now. This is where the power shifts. The moment you stop explaining yourself, the moment you stop overgiving, the moment you stop trying to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. That's the moment you reclaim control. You don't need revenge. You don't need confrontation. You don't need closure. Distance is the consequence. And silence is the boundary. Let them sit with the absence of what they took for granted. Let them feel the weight of no longer having access to your energy, because the truth is, they never deserved the version of you that kept sacrificing itself. You were generous, you were patient, you were forgiving, and they failed to rise to that standard. That doesn't make you foolish. It makes you finished tolerating it. From now on, you don't prove your worth. You observe behavior, you set limits, you walk away early. Not out of bitterness, out of self-respect. Your kindness isn't gone, it's guarded. And the people who deserve it will never feel threatened by your boundaries. Only the ones who wanted unlimited access without responsibility ever will. So understand this, your kindness was never the problem, it was the test. And it showed you exactly who passed and who never deserved to be there in the first place. Now you move differently. Now you choose yourself. Now you stop bleeding for people who never learned how to hold anything gently. And that's not cruelty, that's evolution. Your kindness showed their true nature, and now it's showing you your own strength. And once you see it, once the illusion cracks, you start noticing patterns you ignored before. You remember the moments you brushed off, the jokes that cut a little too close, the favors that were never returned, the apologies that never came. You realize you were always adjusting yourself to make them comfortable, lowering your expectations, explaining away disrespect, convincing yourself that asking for basic decency was somehow too much. That's what prolonged kindness without limits does. It trains you to doubt your own instincts. But here's the reality you're finally waking up to. You weren't sensitive. You weren't dramatic. You weren't imagining things. You were reacting to information. Every time someone crossed a line and felt no consequence, they learned something about you. They learned how far they could go, how much they could take, how little they needed to give back, and they adjusted accordingly. People don't rise to kindness automatically. Some people exploit it. That's the uncomfortable truth. You see, empathy is rare, integrity is rare, accountability is rare. So when you offer kindness freely, you are placing something valuable into an environment where not everyone knows how to handle value. Some people protect it, others consume it, and the ones who consume it will always tell you it's your fault for offering it. They'll say, you should have known better. They'll say, you expected too much. They'll say you misunderstood them, but notice something. They never say they're sorry, because that would require reflection, and reflection would expose who they are. So instead, they shift blame, they minimize, they gaslight, and for a long time, you accepted it. You told yourself that being understanding meant being endlessly forgiving, that being mature meant absorbing disrespect quietly, that being kind meant never pushing back. But maturity isn't silence, it's discernment. And kindness without discernment is just self-neglect wearing a moral costume. The moment you stop participating in that dynamic, the masks start slipping. Suddenly, the same people who relied on your patience accuse you of being selfish. The same people who benefited from your generosity call you cold. That reaction tells you everything. Because people who truly respect you do not panic when you set boundaries. They adjust. Only the ones who were feeding off your availability feel threatened by limits. Think about that. The anger wasn't about losing you. It was about losing control. You were never meant to be endlessly accessible. You were never meant to carry emotional labor for everyone around you. You were never meant to fix what others refuse to take responsibility for. And deep down, you knew that. That exhaustion you felt wasn't random. It was your body reacting to being overextended for too long. You kept giving because you believed loyalty meant endurance. But loyalty to people who disrespect you is just delayed self-betrayal. And now, you're done with that. Now you see that kindness should be intentional, measured, reciprocal. Not because you want to become cruel, but because you refuse to be careless with your energy ever again. There's a difference between being kind and being available to be consumed. You're learning that difference now, And here's where something changes inside you. Not in a loud way, not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, irreversible way. You stop explaining yourself. You stop justifying your distance. You stop chasing closure from people who never cared enough to offer it. You realize closure doesn't come from conversation. It comes from clarity, and clarity is already here. They showed you who they were when your kindness made their lives easier, not better. They showed you who they were when they took and never replenished. They showed you who they were when your presence became expected instead of appreciated. That was the truth. And once you accept it, the emotional fog lifts. You stop romanticizing people's potential. You stop falling in love with who they could be. You start dealing with who they actually are. That's power. Because power isn't dominance. It's alignment with reality. You no longer give people the benefit of the doubt at the cost of your peace. You no longer sacrifice your well-being to maintain harmony with people who thrive on imbalance. You choose calm over chaos, distance over drama, self-respect over approval. And let's be clear, this isn't about punishing anyone. It's about protecting yourself. Because when you keep giving kindness to people who misuse it, you teach them nothing. But when you withdraw it, you finally teach them consequence. Not through words, through absence. Absence forces reflection, or at least it forces awareness of loss. And even if they never reflect, even if they never change, you still win, because your life becomes quieter, cleaner, lighter. You start noticing how peaceful it feels, not to be drained constantly, not to brace yourself before every interaction, not to second-guess your reactions. You realize how much energy you were spending just maintaining dynamics that were never healthy to begin with. That realization is sobering, but it's also freeing, because now you get to choose differently. You get to be selective with who has access to you. You get to invest in people who reciprocate without being asked. You get to give kindness where it is respected, not consumed. And yes, some people will fall away. Let them. Anyone who only stays when you are useful was never there for you. You don't need to announce your departure. You don't need to make a statement. Growth doesn't require an audience, just consistency. And as you continue forward, something else happens. You start trusting yourself again. You trust your instincts, your discomfort, your intuition. You stop overriding those signals in the name of being nice, because being kind to yourself finally becomes the priority. And that's not selfish. That's survival with dignity. You're no longer interested in being admired for your tolerance. You're interested in being respected for your standards. You understand now that kindness is not your default setting anymore. It's a privilege earned through consistency, through effort, through mutual regard. And the people who deserve it will never demand it. They won't test how much they can take. They won't push until you break. They will notice when you give. They will care when you withdraw. That's the difference. So, no, your kindness didn't fail. It succeeded in the only way that mattered. It revealed truth. It showed you who was worthy of your time and who was only passing through to extract value. It showed you who could be trusted and who needed distance. And now, armed with that knowledge, you move forward differently, stronger, calmer, more deliberate. You no longer bleed for validation. You no longer shrink to keep others comfortable. Like, you take up your space, and the right people will adjust. The wrong ones will disappear. Either way, you're no longer confused. Your kindness showed their true nature. And now, it's guiding you toward a life where your generosity is met with respect, not entitlement. A life where your presence is valued, not assumed. A life where peace is not something you have to earn by suffering. That's the shift. That's the lesson. And once you learn it, you never unlearn it. And as you step further into this awareness, something else becomes impossible. to ignore. The silence feels different now. It no longer feels empty. It feels protected. You begin to notice how much noise you were surrounded by before. Endless demands, unspoken expectations, emotional debts you never agreed to carry, and you ask yourself a question that changes everything. Why was I the one always adjusting? Why was it always your responsibility to understand, to forgive, to endure? That question doesn't make you angry, it makes you clear. You see now that kindness was never meant to be limitless. It was meant to be shared between people who value it. And the moment you stopped pouring yourself into places that never filled you back up, your energy returned. Slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. You breathe easier. You sleep deeper. You think more clearly. Because peace returns when you stop negotiating with people who profit from your confusion. There's a strange power in no longer needing to be understood by those who misunderstood you on purpose. A calm settles in when you accept that not everyone deserves an explanation. You no longer chase resolution, you choose alignment. And here's what truly separates who you were from who you are becoming. You no longer confuse kindness with tolerance. You understand that allowing repeated disrespect is not compassion, it's avoidance. Avoidance of conflict, avoidance of disappointment, avoidance of the truth. But the truth no longer scares you. You've seen it, you've survived it, and now you're shaped by it. You stop needing people to admit what they did. You stop waiting for accountability that will never come, because you finally realize something critical. Closure is internal. It comes the moment you stop handing your power to people who misuse it. You don't announce your boundaries, you live them. You don't warn people of consequences. You let them experience distance, and that distance speaks louder than any argument ever could. Some will try to pull you back into old patterns. They'll reminisce, they'll minimize, they'll pretend nothing happened. But you're not the same person who stayed quiet to keep the peace. You're the person who understands that peace without respect is just emotional captivity. And now, you're free. Free to give without fear, free to say no without guilt, free to walk away without needing permission. Your kindness is no longer reactive. It's intentional. You give it because you choose to, not because you're afraid of being disliked. And that shift changes everything. You don't harden, you refine. You don't become cold, you become precise. You don't lose empathy, you place it where it belongs. Because kindness, when paired with self-respect, becomes strength. And strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't argue. It doesn't chase. It simply withdraws from what no longer aligns. You stop proving your value. You start protecting it. And the people who truly belong in your life feel closer, safer, more real. Because they were never competing with your boundaries. They respected them. That's how you know the difference now. You no longer wonder why certain people faded away. You understand. They failed the moment they treated your kindness as a resource instead of a gift.